Last week we were looking at Ruth chapter 2, and I'm pretty sure this is the verse that we were looking at, 2 verse 2, where we ran into a situation where the relative pronoun, uh, it's sort of, we end up with a redundancy in a prepositional phrase where the prepositional phrase also has a suffix, object suffix. And so what ends up happening, I guess I should say possessive suffix, what ends up happening is in the English translation, if we translate both the relative pronoun and the possessive suffix, we get a redundancy in English. So I had said that I was going to look up where Furtado discusses this and kind of give you some examples of where this happens elsewhere in Hebrew. And it just so happened that in my elementary Hebrew course, we ran into one of these the same week. So I wanted to show you what I had found here. So in verse 2, we've got Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go in the field or to the field, and I will glean among the sheaves, the ears of grain, after whomever." Now I'm saying whomever here because of what follows, but you could just say after whom. And we discussed in class, is this after whom or is this after which? Like, is the antecedent, or I should say the referent, is the referent for this relative pronoun the event of her gleaning? Like, after gleaning, something will happen? Or is this a spatial preposition rather than a temporal preposition? That is to say, she will glean behind whomever. Whomever what? Whomever she shall find, I shall find favor in the eyes of him. Now, when we translate that phrase literally in English, it's very awkward. I will glean among the sheaves behind whom I shall find favor in his eyes. That's really bad English, and it's not a good translation if it's bad English. So what we end up doing is we end up saying, I will glean among the sheaves behind, and I say whomever, because again, we've got this sort of modal idea in the imperfect here. Behind whomever I might find favor in the eyes of. Or behind, behind, it's really, it takes a lot of thought to bring this into good English. You might even drop whomever and you might say behind whichever person I find favor with, or behind with whom, behind the one with whom I find favor in his eyes. This is really not easy to translate into natural English. And one of the reasons for that, there's a few, but one of the reasons is because of the redundancy of the in his eyes. When you've got the relative pronoun here, we're going to say in whose eyes, and we don't need this possessive suffix on the end. So if I come over here to Furtado, I find the same thing going on in this sentence. Great is the man whom we have stood before him. So again, in English, we don't say whom we have stood before him. We would just say whom we have stood before. Or, since we don't want to end a sentence in English with a preposition, we'll bring this before whom we stood or have stood. So that polished English translation becomes either great is the man before whom we have stood, or as Furtado changes the order. The man before whom we have stood is great. That's probably the most natural English. But you'll recognize that we don't have the word him in that English translation at all. This preposition has an object suffix on it. And this is part of that redundancy of object that happens in Hebrew. The object is marked here. That's why we translate this as whom. But it's also marked here, before him. And like I said, in English, we don't have that redundant object. And so I believe he discusses this in the chapter. In English, a preposition is placed at the beginning of the clause. For example, the place in which he dwelled. In Hebrew, the preposition is placed at the end of the clause, and a pronoun that agrees with the noun being modified is placed on the preposition. This pronoun is called resumptive because it resumes or picks up again the noun being modified. All right, so that's certainly what we've got going on here in sentence 5. The object suffix here is resuming, it's functioning resumptively. It's resuming the object that was mentioned with the relative pronoun. It's a little bit different over here in Ruth 2:2 because you don't have an object pronoun on a preposition. You have a possessive pronoun on a noun with a preposition. So it's a little bit different there. But that redundancy that comes out in English is very similar between these two. So I just wanted to point that out for you, see if that was helpful at all.